Welcome to Wide Awake News. It is October 29th in the year 2013. This is Charlie McGrath's Wide Awake News. And today, this is Karen. I'm subbing for Charlie, who will be back with a new schedule in November. We are moving up an hour, so we will be starting at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, 3 p.m. Pacific time, and I believe 9 p.m. GMT. Dinah will be covering Karen's Corner tomorrow with Suzanne Posel. And then I will be back for the first 3 weeks in November on a quest for truth. This is not going to be a series for the faint-hearted. This is going to be a series for those of us who realize that in the time we have left, truth is important to find out. And truth is directly related to the size of our perspective and to our ability to reach beyond what we are learning. In this life, we all have our choices, deciding who's wrong and who's right, and ways we can silence the voices which lead us from darkness to light, ways we can use misdirection, ways we can sow our mistrust, ways we can show our rejection, yet each of us still turns to dust. Each of us still turns to dust. It's the legacy of our birth. Live out our minutes we must, yet it's we who determine our worth. I think of this as I'm choosing and wondering, where is my way? Will I be winning or losing with thoughts that I think and I say? Will I be gifting the planet by learning to love and let go? Or will I continue to damn it with hatred by letting it grow? Still each of us turns to dust with the legacy of our birth. Live out our minutes we must, yet it's we who determine our worth. It is I who determines my worth. And I come to you today in a very solemn mood. I am conceding that we've lost collectively. We have failed to turn the tide, and as we argue amongst ourselves and follow the parade and the theater of politics, starfish are melting in our oceans. And as someone who moved to Catalina when I was 12, who graduated there, who went back, and Catalina was a part of my life, really a regular part up until a little over 10 years ago. However, I think that we need to pay attention now to what's going on. Last Friday, they evacuated all personnel from Fukushima. TEPCO has been lying to us all along, and I think now that you should hear what Radchik and Loren Murray have to say on Jim Fetzer's show. So, Brett, will you please roll the tape?
Continuing and concluding my conversation with Loren Murray and Christina Consolo about Fukushima, I really am at your disposal because the two of you are the experts. I know we want to address the 28 indications that the West Coast is being fried with nuclear radiation, but I leave it to your discretion as to how we shall proceed. Loren?
We have this article and other articles. We'll send it all to you, and you can weave it into the interview.
Yes, well, Bill Fox, to whom I'm very indebted for arranging these interviews, will be preparing transcripts of our conversations for publications as articles in Veterans Today, and he would be very pleased to include the links to any articles you want to add, Loren, and, of course, any graphics you want to provide for the publication in VT.
Sure. Okay, Christina, how about if we each read one of these 28 signs on the Pacific coast of North America?
Sure.
So the first one, which we mentioned already, is polar bears, seals, and walruses along the Alaska coastline suffering from fur loss and open sores. And that's also been reported in the moose population. There's a big moose die-off from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic along the Canadian-U.S. border. So you go ahead and do number two.
Number two was the epidemic of sea lion deaths along the California coastline. But I also want to mention that they had an unusual event as far down as San Diego this year, where seal pups were being abandoned in much greater numbers than what the rescues were used to seeing. And they still don't have an explanation about why these seal pups were abandoned. They were all underweight, and some of them have been rehabilitated and put back into nature. But these events are really escalating. They're moving right up the coast.
Could it be that from the evolutionary point of view, the seal population, the mothers recognize when they have offspring that aren't likely to be capable of sustaining their way, and therefore they abandon them early to not, invest more maternal resources in their upbringing when their prospects are so slender?
Yeah, that's a definite possibility.
The other thing that happens is that when a population is put under stress, and the young are affected the most by toxins and so forth, and it weakens them and they can't keep up with the mothers, or they get lost or left behind. The mothers just can't take care of them or find them when they come back to where they thought they were. So 45% of the pups born in June have died in Southern California along the coast. That's a very high death rate. It's the same as the infant mortality. And when you see phenomena occurring in humans and in animal populations, it has to be an environmental cause.
Yeah, it's all profoundly disturbing.
Continue. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, so did you have anything else to say, Christina?
No, I did try to track someone down at NOAA to comment on the seal mortality and what was found in terms of the testing for radioactive materials, because Any News had reported over a year ago that they did find radiation in the seals, but that it wasn't above what they expected it to be for normal background. However, they never indicated if it was cesium or strontium or what they tested for and what the levels were. And when I tried to call NOAA to pin somebody down with this, I got such a runaround. In fact, some of it I did on air on my show, and we kept getting sent to David Kelly, and then I would call David Kelly and say, oh, you want the David Kelly in Hawaii? And then I would call him, and they would send me to someone else. And what I found out was that they actually carved up these seals and sent them to 20 different labs for testing. You know, they sent the whiskers to one lab, and they sent the teeth to another lab, and they sent the skin from the dorsal area to another lab. And so, I mean, they're kind of doing, it's like the Manhattan Project, but in reverse.
Same thing. It's the same thing.
Where they divide up all the information, knowing these people probably won't talk to each other and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. So number 3 is that along the Pacific coast of Canada and the Alaska coastline, the population of sockeye salmon is at a historic low. Many are blaming Fukushima, and certainly this woman, she's a professional biologist, has fundraised and done a study on the salmon in British Columbia, in the Fraser River and other rivers. And this is an area where a large orca population will summer. The resident orcas that live in a particular area, they come and migrate and spend the whole summer there, and they usually arrive with new baby orcas, so they're feeding them too. They live on salmon populations. The other orcas that are called transient populations, they live on marine sea mammals, and they travel in groups of 3 so that they're quiet and they can sneak up on the sea mammals, seals and stuff. And so they have very different diets, and we're going to see the effects of the radiation and the difference in the diet in these populations over time. And I predict that the coastal salmon, the resident populations, are going to have a more severe impact because the salmon are going out in the Pacific. They're eating smaller fish. It bioconcentrates the radiation. And we just have to wait and see. But this woman who did the study and independently raised the money to have these salmon lab analyzed, they have very severe viruses, and that indicates immune system damage, as well as a slimy starfish goo. The starfish are just kind of melting along the North Pacific coast, and then the jellyfish also. So that really sounds like a viral infection or some kind of a bacterial viral slime on them.
But, the exposure to radiation will affect their immune systems or their capacity to cope with otherwise, threats to their environment they might normally be able to deal with, and therefore make them far more vulnerable to these kinds of diseases and related problems.
Number 4 was something is causing fish all along the west coast of Canada to bleed from their gills, bellies, and eyeballs. I mean, bleeding and bruising is a hallmark of radiation exposure. I'm sure there's mutations of viruses and bacteria that could be making these fish sick. They're indicating from this article that it's in multiple species. Now, I did call several fisheries over the last few days in Canada, one in the Great Lakes region, Purdy's, and another in the Vancouver area. And both of the people that I spoke to at those fisheries were very forthcoming. They all knew about Fukushima. They knew that there was a potential for it to be affecting their catches. They did report from both the Great Lakes region and from BC that they're experiencing lows in their catch. Nothing historic, but that it was kind of across the board. But neither organization had noted any increase of disease. And when I asked them who's testing the fish for radiation, they said that wasn't their job. That happened after the fish leave their marketplace.
After the fish leave their marketplace.
Yeah. So
they're getting into the food chain for the human population, and only then they're going to be tested? Not likely, because the retailers are going to want to market it and make their profit. I mean, no one cares about the health of the consumer.
Well,
right.
They don't just balkanize countries, they balkanize the media, too. So that's what's happening.
It all needs to be tested, and Loren had brought up in an interview that she did last week with Alfred Weber that, I mean, there's a serious economic impact to this disaster that we're just now starting to realize. And obviously it's going to be, affecting the fishing industry pretty severely.
Just as has happened in the Gulf Coast from the BP disaster. I mean, it's just wiped out whole industries there.
Right.
But what they're doing is they're out there fishing like mad. They're scraping the bottom. They have these huge nets that are a mile wide. They're just taking everything indiscriminately, and feeding it, and turning it in, canning it, freezing it, and turning it into human food. This is just how they spread the radiation everywhere. They want everyone exposed. Just exactly what they're doing in Japan by burning radioactive trash all over Japan. Number 5 is a vast field of radioactive debris from Fukushima that is approximately the size of California or Texas, is crossing the Pacific Ocean. It's already crossed, and it's starting to collide with the West Coast.
That's stunning. That's stunning.
That's right. And there's a very good article, October 18th, by Greg Ray in the Herald newspaper in Australia. It's called The Ocean is Broken. And this is by a sailor who made many trips, yacht races across the Pacific. And what he's saying now, He sailed his boat from Osaka to San Francisco recently. He said, quote, "The next leg of the long voyage was from Osaka to San Francisco. And for most of that trip, the desolation was tinged with nauseous horror and a degree of fear." He said, "After we left Japan, it felt as if the ocean itself was dead. We hardly saw any living things. We saw one whale, sort of rolling helplessly on the surface with what looked like a big tumor on its head. It was pretty sickening. I've done a lot of miles on the ocean in my life, and I'm used to seeing turtles, dolphins, sharks, and big flurries of feeding birds. But this time, for 3,000 nautical miles, there was nothing alive to be seen. In place of the missing life was garbage in astounding volumes. In a lot of places, we couldn't start out our motor for fear of entangling the propeller in the mass of pieces of rope and cable. That's an unheard of situation out in the ocean. If we did decide to motor, we couldn't do it at night, only in the daytime, with a lookout on the bow, watching for rubbish. On the bow, in the waters above Hawaii, you could see right down into the depths. I could see that the debris isn't just on the surface, it's all the way down. And it's all sizes, from a soft drink bottle to pieces the size of a big car or truck. We saw a factory chimney sticking out of the water with some kind of boiler thing still attached below the surface. We saw a big container-type thing just rolling over and over on the waves. We were reeving around these pieces of debris. It was like sailing through a garbage pile. That is reality. That is what is happening.
All right, reality of what is happening. It is not a pretty sight at all. From beforeitsnews.com and Susan Duclos. From Canada to California, starfish are dying en masse, described as disintegrated. Now there is just goo left and single arms clinging to rock faces, tube feet still moving. Staff at the Vancouver Aquarium do not know what is causing this mass die-off, reports Global News, and the Vancouver Sun reports that within weeks, the tentacled orange sea stars had all but disappeared in Howe Sound and Vancouver Harbor, disintegrating where they sat on the ocean floor. Then there is a photo if you want to go to beforeitsnews.com. And he gives a first-hand account of what he witnessed, saying, "We just started noticing dead starfish that looked like they had their arms chopped off. It really struck a chord in other divers who were seeing it on Facebook and social media, both locally and as far away as California, who had been seeing similar things," he continued. Still without any answers, Martin wrote to invertebrate expert Christopher Ma, a researcher at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., and author of Etchen Blog. In his email, he said, "The starfish seem to waste away, deflate a little, and then just disintegrate. The arms just detach and the central disc falls apart. It seems to happen rapidly and not just dead animals undergoing decomposition, as I observe single arms clinging to the rock faces, tube feet still moving, with the skin split, gills flapping in the current. I've seen single animals in the past looking like this, and the first dive this morning I thought it might be crabbers chopping them up and tossing them off the rocks. Then we did our second dive in the area close to fishing, and in an absolutely amazing numbers, the bottom from about 20 to 50 feet was absolutely littered with arms, oral discs, tube feeds, gonads, and gills. It was kind of creepy." So this is where we find ourselves today, and for the first time in my adult life, I have lost hope. We're not going to make it this time. We're going to have to go through hell. And some of us may make it to see it on the other side, but right now we refuse to even face this. You know, the media should really be playing this up. Instead, we're serving the the globalist bankers who want central banking and more power and control. And as they continue to use depleted uranium and drones and just extinguish people on the other side of the planet, we grow ever closer to extinction right here, right in front of us. You know, I want to encourage you to really think about what is important to you, as I have been doing this past weekend. I have not been real happy. I've just been accepting the fact that the starfish are indeed melting. And as someone who came from Catalina Island and who has been on a lot of different places in the world under the sea, this is very dire indeed, and it will take more than just talk to do something. We should be addressing this. We'll be right back after these messages. If you want to call in and comment, 877-342-6673. All right, well, we do need to come together if we're going to get through this, and I by no means am trying to imply that the loss of starfish is more important than people, because it is not, but it is a symptom. When we look around our world, it is a huge symptom of the problems that face us that we are not addressing because we are still blinded by political factions, by wars, and by lies from the very people who claim to be serving us. And they are, as the first course for their greed. Now, Brett, if you're in the studio, I know that we've got Meat Dog calling in. If you could pick up, we'll get you on, Meat. So, are you there? Okay, it sounds like you're there,
yeah.
Meat. Hi.
Okay, am I on the air now?
Yes. And
okay,
actually,
great. Hey,
you
listen,
should turn
I
down.
don't want to take up too much.
Wait, turn down your speakers in the background, Meat, because it's bleeding.
Yeah, I got it off right now. Yeah, I got several questions. I don't want to monopolize the time, but I haven't had a chance to ask anybody that has any knowledge about this. You know, when the event first occurred, I went to the local health food store and got me some of that seaweed with iodine in it, and I started taking that, and I took that for 6 months, and I haven't touched it for about a year and a half or so since. Now, what about potassium iodine? I've heard that could be harmful if you take it if you don't need it. Is that true? You know, those pills?
I've heard that as well. I'm not the one to ask. Actually, Dinah is going to be on tomorrow. She'd probably be more of a person to ask about supplements. We take iodine as well, and to tell you the truth, Meat, it's just when I don't know what to tell you. You know, try and make the best choices you can.
I thought I came in late. I went to the store and I came in late today to the show, so I thought you had maybe an expert about Fukushima on tonight I could ask questions about. I thought that was the topic.
I was playing actually some Christina Consolo with Lorraine Murray, and I consider them experts. I was just playing an excerpt from their program with James Fetzer to highlight what's going on here. I have tried actually to not pay that much attention living up here in the Oregon in the Northwest, because I don't want to give it real power, but I see what is happening. And all I can do is know that I'm spirit having a human experience, but at the same time, when you also understand that they are dropping toxins through geoengineering, they are poisoning our water, you know, with fluoride, they're fracking. The point today of the program is for people really to understand that we may not have as much time left as we have chosen to think prior to this time. And it's up to each one of us to determine how we want to spend the time, what we want to do, and what we want to focus on. So those are really the topics. But Fukushima is huge, and they're going to be taking fuel from it. And I was going to read a little bit about that problem coming up. So do you have another comment, or else I'm going to go to this article about the review?
I was wondering, maybe you can answer rumor. I've heard, when it first happened, I heard rumors that they're going to have to virtually evacuate Tokyo, and that proved to be a false rumor. But are there any, not just the Fukushima proper, but are there any plans to evacuate any larger areas within a 200-mile or 200-kilometer radius? Basically, are there plans for any mass evacuations, and are large numbers of people planning on leaving Japan?
You know, I think what will depend on that is if they have other earthquakes, which again on Friday they evacuated the whole nuclear plant. So in terms of evacuating the surrounding areas, I think what will happen is we'll just have to see how bad it gets. So let me go to this article so that we can find out here. It says fuel removal from Fukushima's reactor 4 threatens apocalyptic scenario. This is from Conscious Life News. It was dated the 28th. An operation with potentially apocalyptic consequences is expected to begin in a little over 2 weeks from now, as early as November 8th at Fukushima's damaged and sinking reactor 4, when plant operator TEPCO will attempt to remove over 1,300 spent fuel rods holding the radiation equivalent of 14,000 Hiroshima bombs from a spent fuel storage tank perched on the reactor's upper floor. So it's not a small thing, mate. There's a lot going on here.
Well, and if I understand correctly, if just two of those rods touch each other and spark, they could start a massive fire and possible nuclear fission, and the whole thing could go up. I mean, this is just crazy. You know, I'm like you in a way. I didn't even want to think about it, but I mean, you know, this is nuts. Well, I'll tell you what. Hey, thanks for trying to help me out here. Maybe I'll call in tomorrow, but it's always good to talk to you, and I enjoy your emails. You take it easy.
All right. Well, thank you, mate. Yeah, I don't have all the answers here, but I just want people to understand that life is precious, you know, and we really don't know how much time we have left, especially facing this. And so actually, when I first really started to understand how we were sinking quickly was when the ongoing Gulf of Mexico debacle happened with BP. And starfish are melting there. People are getting sicker and sicker. I mean, when you look at the fact that the global so-called representatives all talk about overpopulation, it gets very scary. And if you listen to Dinah's program yesterday, you also heard her talking about a memo that they want to reduce the population to 1.5 billion people. So you can check Dinah's out, and I'll come back with more of this article on the other side of this break. Sorry, I know it's bad news, but I think until we face it, we won't be able to do anything about it. Be right back after these messages. Stay tuned. Aware of what's going on, we can't totally only focus on the negative because that in itself is also a trap. However, we've got to understand that we are being misdirected when we don't demand that Fukushima take a real front spot in what is happening, and to allow the military-industrial complex to continue just ways of fighting instead of being forced to release their secret hidden technology, which possibly could help heal this. You know, they're just going about bombing, and the never-ending budget for the military complex when finally TEPCO and Japan have admitted they need global help. So back to what they're facing. Fukushima Reactor 4, while the Reactor 4 building itself did not suffer a meltdown, it did suffer a hydrogen explosion, is now tipping and sinking, and has zero ability to withstand another seismic event. Because last week Japan did have another earthquake. I believe it was a 7.1, and then they had like a meter-high tsunami warning, which wasn't too bad. However, now the Japan Times explained, to remove the rods, TEPCO has erected a 273-ton mobile crane above the building that will be operated remotely from a separate room. Spent fuel rods will be pulled from the racks they are stored in and inserted one by one into a heavy steel chamber while the assemblies are still underwater. Once the chamber is removed from the pool and lowered to the ground, it will be transported to another pool in an undamaged building on the site for storage. Under normal circumstances, such an operation would take little more than 3 months, but TEPCO is hoping to complete the complicated task within fiscal 2014. A chorus of voices has been sounding alarm over the never-been-done-at-this-scale plan to manually remove the 400 tons of spent fuel by TEPCO, who so far have been responsible for mishap after mishap in the ongoing crisis at the crippled nuclear plant. Arnie Gunderson, a veteran U.S. nuclear engineer and director of Fairwinds Energy Education, warned this summer that they're going to have difficulty in removing a significant number of the rods, and said that to jump to the conclusion that it's going to work just fine is quite a leap of logic. Paul Gunter, MD, Director of Reactor Oversight Project with Tacoma Park, MD, based Beyond Nuclear, also sounded alarm on Thursday, telling Common Dreams in a statement that, given the uncertainties of the condition and array of hundreds of tons of nuclear fuel assemblies, it will be a risky round of highly radioactive pickup sticks. Gunderson offered this analogy of the challenging process of removing the spent fuel rods. If you think of a nuclear fuel rack as a pack of cigarettes, if you pull a cigarette straight up, it will come out. But these racks have been distorted. Now when they go to pull a cigarette straight out, it's going to likely break and release radioactive cesium and other gases, xenon and krypton, into the air. I suspect come November, December, January, we're going to hear that the building's been evacuated. They broke a fuel rod. The fuel rod is off-gassing. I suspect we'll have more airborne releases as they try to pull the fuel out. If they pull too hard, they'll snap the fuel. I think the racks have been distorted, the fuel is overheated, the pool boiled, and the net effect is that it's likely some of the fuel will be stuck in there for a long, long time. All right, so get your glass of water if you don't have one already. Understand that people like my guest last week, Pamela Osley, believe that we can step into an alternate universe. Somehow we can magically, through our thoughts, make that happen. It seems to me she still lives on this planet in this dimension. I don't know what's going to happen. What I do know is that as we ignore the good stewardship of this planet that is rightfully our job, our world sinks more and more into the abyss. And I apologize for this not being a very happy program. But unless we can look at what we're facing, how can we heal it? How can we deal with it? If we continue to live our lives as usual, what are we really living for? If we only have a month or 2 months, who really knows how much time we have? Isn't it time now to begin to think seriously about looking into quantum physics, about the oneness underneath it all, about being spirit, having a human experience, and try and do what we can to put pressure on our leaders to stop the war, to call an immediate ceasefire in order to address fully with all of the resources available. Fukushima. Wouldn't this be what a civilized people would do? Or will we continue to fight amongst ourselves over whose God is the best when our world is calling out to us? Mother Earth needs our help. Water has memory. We carry it within us. And so now, instead of continuing to talk about this, what I'd like to do is play Deuter. This is a 432 hertz. This raises awareness and energy levels. This is called After the Rain, even though it looks like radioactive rain. Let's see just what some focused attention could do. Look beyond what you've been told. Look within your heart and try and think about if you only had a little bit of time left. If we only had a year or 2 years. If we only had a week, what would you want to do? What is your life worth? I think more than pieces of paper or metal, more than 30 pieces of silver. So, Brett, I want to thank you very much for being in the control room today. Will you please take us out with After the Rain in 432? I will be back the 1st of November with the program Jesus, Man or Myth. If you've got some courage and you want to dig deep and find out what you're really looking for, join me, make your own decision. Be well.